How many husbands have heard their wives say, "If you love me, you'll let me do this"? Those words landed like a sucker punch on what was supposed to be a romantic evening celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary. That night marked the beginning of the end. Melanie, my stunning 30-year-old wife, blindsided me with a revelation I never saw coming. She wanted to sleep with other men. And she didn't bother softening the blow. I had gone all out for the occasion. We dined at one of our favorite upscale restaurants, the kind with crisp white tablecloths and an impeccable wine selection. I even surprised her with a diamond necklace she'd been hinting about since her last birthday. It cost me nearly $1,500, but I didn't mind splurging. She was worth it, or so I thought. But something felt off that night. Our usual flow of easy conversation was absent, replaced by stiff small talk. Melanie seemed restless, her eyes darting around the restaurant like she was searching for someone or something. Normally, she'd be locked in on me, flashing that dazzling smile. Tonight, though, her focus shifted between her wine glass, her fork, and the table, avoiding eye contact at all costs. Then, just as we were finishing dessert, she cleared her throat. "Tyler, there's something I need to say," she began, her voice unusually tense. "It's been on my mind for a while, and I can't keep it to myself anymore." I set my wine glass down, already sensing the weight of her words. "What's going on?" I asked, my chest tightening. Her tone dropped to that low, serious register she used when we were about to have a deep conversation. My first thought was that she wanted to talk about starting a family. We'd postponed having kids for years, waiting until our careers were stable and our savings more secure. Now, with all those boxes checked, I figured she was ready to take the leap. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Tyler," she said carefully, as if testing each word before it left her lips, "I need to explore something outside our relationship. I need space, freedom, to figure out who I am. And I believe in the end it'll make me a better wife for you." Her words hit me like a freight train. Confusion and anger surged through me in equal measure. "What are you saying?" I asked, leaning forward, my eyes narrowing. "What kind of freedom are we talking about here?" She hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I want to explore relationships with other people." It took me a moment to register what she was implying. "Wait, you're saying you want to sleep with other men? Is that it?" She flinched but didn't deny it. "I want us to stay together, Tyler," she said quickly. "I love you deeply. You're my soulmate. I still want to build a family with you, grow old together. But I need to experience this for myself, just for a while. A few months at most. Then I'll come back to you." My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. "You're asking me for permission to cheat?" I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay composed. A couple at a nearby table glanced in our direction. "Please, Tyler," she whispered urgently, "keep your voice down. I don't want to make a scene." That's when it hit me. She'd chosen this public setting on purpose. She knew I wouldn't explode here, surrounded by strangers. She'd planned it all. My stomach churned at the realization. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and rage. "Why would you even want this? What's missing in our marriage that could make you ask for something so insane?" "It's not about you," she insisted. "It's about me. I've been feeling trapped, like I haven't fully lived. I need to do this to figure out who I really am. And I promise, when it's over, I'll be yours completely." Her words felt like knives, each one slicing deeper than the last. "You think sleeping with other men will make you a better wife? Are you even hearing yourself, Melanie?" She didn't respond, just stared down at her wine glass as if the answers to my questions were hidden in its ruby depths. I couldn't sit there any longer. The walls felt like they were closing in. I pushed my chair back, stood, and drained the last of my wine in one gulp. "Where are you going?" Melanie asked, her voice laced with alarm. "I don't know," I said, grabbing my coat, "but you can take a cab home." Without looking back, I walked out, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. I stormed out of the restaurant, found my car, and sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I started the engine without a clue where I was headed. My thoughts raced. a chaotic tangle of confusion and anger. Melanie's words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I didn't even notice the streets blurring past as I drove aimlessly into the night. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I pulled over somewhere unfamiliar. I reclined the seat and closed my eyes, though sleep came in fitful bursts. When I woke up the next morning, disoriented and stiff from the night in the car, it took me a moment to piece everything together. For a brief, blissful second, I thought maybe it had all been a horrible dream. But as I stepped out to stretch, the events of the previous night came rushing back, heavy and unavoidable. I handled the immediate need first, finding some bushes nearby to relieve myself, then climbed back into the car. My mouth was dry and my head throbbed from dehydration and lack of sleep. Coffee. I needed coffee. Badly. After driving a bit, I spotted a small diner. It wasn't much to look at, but it had the promise of caffeine and food. I ordered a simple breakfast to go, along with a large black coffee, and sat in my car while I tried to collect my thoughts. Melanie's shocking admission wasn't just a bombshell. It was an earthquake, shaking the foundation of everything I thought we had. I couldn't shake the feeling that she had already crossed some kind of line, or at the very least was preparing to. As I stared into my coffee cup, I wrestled with the enormity of it all. What was I supposed to do now? Pretend she hadn't said those things? Allow her to go through with this so-called exploration? No. That would be the death of our marriage, and I wasn't about to let it go without a fight. Still, I had no concrete plan yet. When I finally turned my phone on, it lit up with missed calls and messages from Melanie. She'd been trying to reach me all night, asking where I was and if I was okay. I wasn't ready to face her yet, so I ignored the messages. Instead, I sipped my coffee, stared out at the empty parking lot, and began to form a rough outline of what I needed to say. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was steeled for the confrontation. Melanie was already at the door, rushing out as soon as she saw me. "Tyler, where have you been? I was so worried." Her voice wavered and her eyes looked puffy, as if she'd been crying. "I'm fine," I said flatly, brushing past her. "I'm going to take a shower. After that, we need to have a serious talk." Her hand reached for mine, but I pulled away, heading upstairs. The hot water cascaded over me as I tried to sort through the flood of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion. The woman I'd married, the one I had built a life with, wanted to throw it all away for what? To figure herself out? The absurdity of it all made my blood boil. We had a beautiful life, at least I thought we did. A lovely home, financial security, and years of memories. I had never so much as entertained the idea of being with someone else. But Melanie? She was ready to rewrite the rules of our marriage on a whim. When I came back downstairs, dressed in fresh clothes, Melanie was sitting at the kitchen island. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee mug, her knuckles white. She looked up as I entered, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of what I might say. I grabbed my own cup and sat across from her, placing a notepad and pen on the counter to mask my nerves. "All right, Melanie," I said, my voice deliberately steady. "Explain this to me. Why do you want to pursue relationships outside of our marriage?" She sighed deeply, as if she'd rehearsed this conversation in her head a dozen times. "Tyler, it's not that I don't love you. I do. But I feel stuck. I don't feel validated as a woman. I need to figure out who I am and what I want." I raised an eyebrow. "You need to figure out what you want. You're saying you don't know what you want right now." "I'm saying I need the freedom to explore it," she replied. "It's not about leaving you, Tyler. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to live on my own terms for a little while." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. On your own terms? And by that, you mean sleeping with other men, right? Her eyes darted away. "Maybe," she admitted softly. "If it feels right." The calm facade I'd been trying to maintain began to crack. "So what? You're asking for my permission to cheat on me?" "It's not cheating if you know about it," she said quickly. "This isn't about hurting you, Tyler. It's about me finding something that's missing." "Finding something that's missing," I repeated bitterly. "And you think the answer is to betray me? To break our vows? What am I supposed to do, Melanie? Sit here and wait while you explore?" She flinched at the word betray, but didn't argue. "I'm not asking you to wait, Tyler. I'm asking you to trust me." The words stung in their irony. Trust? That was the very thing she was shattering. I stared at her across the table, my heart heavy with the realization that this wasn't just a rough patch. This was a breaking point. I clenched my jaw and took another deliberate sip of coffee, struggling to keep my emotions in check. Let me make sure I've got this straight, I said, my voice low but firm. You're planning to meet other men, date them, maybe even sleep with them. And you're going to do all this while still living here with me. Am I missing anything? It's not that black and white, Melanie replied, shaking her head like I'd misunderstood her. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because it sounds pretty straightforward to me. What happens to us during this exploration of yours? Do we just put our marriage on hold? Or are you still planning to play the role of my wife while you're out with other men? Of course I'll still be with you, Tyler, she said, her voice soft but insistent. We're a family. I love you and I don't want to lose that. This is just something I need to do for myself. For yourself, I echoed, my tone dripping with disbelief. And how often are you planning to do this? Weekends? Weeknights? Every other day? I don't know yet, she said, her tone edging toward irritation. Why are you so focused on the logistics? Because, Melanie, I said, my voice tightening, I need to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do while you're out whining and dining with these other men. She rolled her eyes. I don't have a boyfriend, Tyler. At least, not yet. Her casual delivery made my stomach turn. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself and took a deep breath. I just need to understand, Melanie. Have you truly thought this through? Do you realize what this could do to us? To me? She nodded slowly but said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes. She hadn't considered my feelings at all, just her own desire. Then she dropped the bombshell that would haunt me forever. If you love me, you'll let me do this. I stared at her in disbelief before shooting back. If you loved me, Melanie, you wouldn't even be thinking about this. That was it, my line in the sand. She looked away, her face set with determination. Tyler, I've already made up my mind. You're not going to change it, she said, her tone resolute. There it was, the ultimatum, the moment everything between us shifted. Melanie genuinely believed that warning me beforehand made it okay. But in my eyes, what she was proposing wasn't just betrayal. It was the death of our marriage. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. All right, I said, my voice steady. If this is what you're dead set on doing, there are conditions. And let me be clear, they're non-negotiable. Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. Conditions, she repeated. First, I began, you'll have to move out. I'm not sharing a roof with you while you're out exploring. And if you think for a second that you're bringing these men into our home, you'd better think again. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Finally, she managed to stammer. Move out? Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem to figure out, I said, shrugging. You've been spending plenty of time with Nicole lately, haven't you? Didn't you say she's divorced and has a place all to herself? Call her and ask if you can stay there. If not, rent a place. But wherever you go, you'll be covering your own expenses. Rent, utilities, the whole deal. Melanie looked stunned. I could see her struggling to process what I was saying. She hadn't expected me to push back like this. She thought I'd crumble, agree to whatever terms she laid out. For the first time since this nightmare began, her eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of uncertainty. Before she could respond, I continued. Let me ask you something, Melanie. When this is all over, do you actually expect to come back here, to resume our marriage like nothing happened? Of course, she said, her voice filled with conviction. I love you, Tyler. You're my husband. I want to have a family with you, grow old together. This is just a phase. I leaned back in my chair, my anger bubbling under the surface. So, while you're out living your so-called phase, what exactly am I supposed to do? Sit here, waiting for you to come back like nothing happened? Have you even considered what this would do to me? She hesitated, her confidence faltering for the first time. I want you to be my husband, Tyler. Only you. What happens while I'm away won't mean anything. When it's over, I'll still want to be with you. I'll still want us to have a family. I almost laughed. She honestly believed that she could sleep with other men, come back to me and pretend like none of it had happened. And she seemed satisfied that I wasn't going to let her bring her lovers into our home, as if that was some kind of victory. Her naivety was staggering. She didn't see it yet, but everything was about to change, and not in the way she expected. "Fine," I said, rising from my seat. "Decide where you're going to live and let me know by the end of the week. But for now, move your stuff into the spare bedroom." "I'm not sharing a bed with you while you're planning this exploration? It already feels like you're halfway out the door. So why pretend otherwise?" Melanie stayed silent, but the look on her face told me her mind was racing. She was beginning to grasp that I wasn't going to let her have her cake and eat it too, not without consequences. Maybe she hadn't expected me to tell her to move out of our bed. But what did she think? That I'd lie next to her every night while she went off to explore other men, pretending everything was fine? No chance. I couldn't help but suspect her friend Nicole had a hand in this. Nicole, a fellow teacher at Melanie's school, had been caught cheating on her husband a few years back. It ended in divorce. From what I'd heard, she'd been sleeping with multiple men and was promptly kicked out of her home. At 35, she was attractive and carried a reputation for being easygoing in all the wrong ways. I had a hunch Nicole had been whispering ideas into Melanie's ear about exploring herself before settling down and having kids. But if Melanie explored too far, there wouldn't be any kids, not with me. What there would be, however, was a divorce. I stood and started to walk away. "Is that it, Tyler? You want me to move out?" Melanie called after me, her voice trailing. "Yeah, that's it for now," I replied, my tone firm. "Don't misunderstand me, Melanie. I don't want this. We promised each other monogamy when we got married, and now you're talking about breaking that promise. What do you expect me to do? Sit here quietly while you go off to sleep with other men? If you're pushing for an open marriage, then don't forget, I get to play by those same rules." She didn't have an answer. Grabbing my car keys, I made for the door. "Where are you going, Tyler?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But one thing's for sure. Move your things to the spare room and start figuring out your next steps. You don't get to cheat on me and stay in this house." I slammed the door on my way out harder than I intended. If it came down to it, I'd leave myself, but since she was the one stirring up this chaos, she could be the one to deal with the inconvenience. And if Nicole was behind all this, maybe she could house Melanie for a while. The urge to drive straight to Nicole's place and confront her was almost overwhelming. I wanted to unload all my frustration on her, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. By Monday morning, I was out of the house before Melanie even woke up. I needed a plan. If she was truly determined to follow through with this insanity, I wasn't about to stand idly by. She might have convinced herself this was reasonable, but I wasn't going to sit at home like a fool while she explored her options. The first step was contacting my lawyer. He typically handled routine matters for me: real estate, legal paperwork, wills. Divorce wasn't his area of expertise, but he referred me to a colleague at his firm. By that afternoon, I had an appointment with a divorce attorney. Meeting with her was tough, but she was sharp and experienced. She laid out the legalities of my situation, and I realized I didn't have to turn this into a bitter battle. A clean 50-50th split of assets seemed fair. We'd started with nothing, built a decent life together, and there was no point fighting over material things. I just wanted to move on from the woman who was betraying me. For now, we weren't filing anything. This was preparation, contingency planning until I had undeniable proof that Melanie was serious about sleeping with other men. The week dragged by. I avoided home as much as possible, spending my evenings at the gym to work off my frustration. Meanwhile, Melanie was spending more time with Nicole. By Thursday, she announced she'd be staying at Nicole's place for a couple of weeks, until she found something permanent. I knew what that meant. Nicole's place was the perfect hideout for her to meet new men without worrying about me. By Saturday, Melanie officially moved out. She packed her things into her car and prepared to leave. Just before driving off, she paused at the door. "Tyler, I don't want to go," she said, her voice laced with hesitation. "Can't we work something out? I still love you, and I want us to make our marriage better." Frustration bubbled up inside me. "Melanie, if you truly loved me and wanted to fix our marriage, you wouldn't be doing this. Of course, I want you to stay, but I'm not going to sit back and watch you sleep with other men. I love you, but I won't tolerate this. Come to marriage counseling with me. Let's figure out where things went wrong. But if you won't do that, then there's nothing left to say. You might as well go." I watched as she finished loading her car. As soon as she was gone, I headed to the hardware store, to buy new locks for the house and reset the garage code. Saturday night and Sunday dragged painfully. I sat in silence, staring at the walls, hoping she'd realize how wrong she was and come back. But she didn't. The following week was sheer misery. I kept myself busy with running in the gym, trying to cope with the sadness and frustration. At times I felt on the verge of breaking. The thought of going to her, begging her to come home, crossed my mind more than once. But every time, I reminded myself, she left to pursue other men. In my solitude, I spent hours reading about infidelity. I was shocked to learn that nearly 40% of married people cheat. Even more surprising was that many couples stayed together afterward. Some tolerated the betrayal as long as it was discreet. Others rationalized it as a way to preserve the marriage for the sake of the kids. The logic behind such choices baffled me. Some claimed they cheated out of love for their spouse, seeking excitement they felt was missing. Home life, they said, was routine and draining, while their lovers offered an escape. No talk of chores or kids after intimacy. It made me sick just thinking about it. How could betrayal ever save a marriage? Marriage is built on trust and commitment, or at least that's how I saw it. Open marriages, polyamory, they all seem like ticking time bombs. Emotional bonds inevitably formed, feelings got hurt, and most ended in divorce anyway. And the risk of diseases? No thanks. That wasn't my idea of love. I began questioning myself. Had I been too focused on building a life and neglected to nurture our relationship? Maybe. I didn't know. What I did know was that Melanie's decision to leave me for other men had devastated me. Her words of love didn't match her actions. I couldn't see how her choices would improve our marriage. The week dragged on. I didn't call her, and Melanie only reached out once to ask if I could forward her mail. That was it. Nothing else. No sign of reconciliation. She moved on with her plans, meeting new men, while I sat alone wondering how it all went so wrong. At one point, I thought about following her, watching to see who she was meeting and where she was going, but every time I passed by Nicole's apartment, I just kept driving. I couldn't bring myself to sink that low. If Melanie came back, it had to be her choice. Forcing her hand or spying on her wouldn't bring us closer. It would only solidify the distance. Still, with each passing day, it felt less and less likely that she was coming back at all. And strangely, the longer she stayed away, the less I found myself wanting her back. A month had passed since she moved out, and with barely any communication between us. She showed up one afternoon unannounced. When she discovered her key no longer worked, she rang the doorbell and knocked on the door. I opened it and greeted her with a neutral expression. "Melanie, what's brought you here today?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "Honey, my key doesn't seem to be working." "What's going on with that?" she asked, her confusion evident. "That's because I changed the locks," I replied matter-of-factly. She stepped forward, attempting to walk past me, but I blocked the doorway. "What do you want, Melanie?" "I just came to pick up a few things I left behind when I moved in with Nicole," she said, as though this were a casual errand. Once again, she wasn't here for me, just her belongings. Her indifference cut deep, and it felt as though my feelings, my pain, and my dignity meant nothing to her. I was just another minor obstacle in her plans. How could she not see the damage she'd caused? Or did she simply not care? "There are boxes in the garage with your stuff," I said, gesturing toward the door. "I gathered everything up from around the house." She frowned, puzzled. "Why would you do that, honey?" "I'll be coming back in a few months. There's no need to pack it all up." I stepped aside, letting her enter. It was still half her house, after all. We walked to the garage, where a dozen neatly packed boxes waited for her. She stared at them, then turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. "How long are you planning to stay with Nicole?" I asked, though I already had an idea. "Nicole's been great," she said, her voice overly bright. "I'll probably stay with her for a few more months. Then I'll come back home and be a better wife to you. We can finally start that family we talked about." I couldn't suppress an eye roll. Did she truly believe that? Did she think that sleeping with other men would somehow make her a better wife or more ready for motherhood? The warped logic of her plan was almost laughable. I had no doubt Nicole had a hand in this delusion, but it didn't matter. I had my own plans. "So, have you found a boyfriend yet?" I asked nonchalantly. Her cheeks flushed, and she averted her gaze, digging through the boxes to avoid my eyes. That reaction told me all I needed to know. Nicole and I have gone on a few dates with guys from the club we've been going to, she admitted softly. But that's all. And how's the intimacy with your new boyfriends? I pressed, watching her squirm. Her face turned crimson, and she avoided answering, keeping her focus on the boxes. After a few moments of awkward silence, I left her there and returned to the kitchen. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat down, and opened the newspaper, acting as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Minutes later, Melanie appeared in the kitchen, lugging a large bag of her belongings. She paused, taking in the spotless counters and immaculate floors. The surprise on her face was unmistakable. She must have imagined chaos. Dirty dishes, piles of laundry, a home that mirrored the mess of our broken marriage. Instead, she found order. I had hired a maid service to clean the house 3 times a week, and the result was a pristine, welcoming space, far better than our relationship. "Is there anything else you need, Melanie?" I asked, glancing up from my paper. She hesitated, clearly unsettled by the changes in her absence. Her eyes darted around the room as though searching for some clue about my life without her. "Honey, have you been okay since I moved in with Nicole?" she asked cautiously. "I'm fine," I replied evenly. "I've been busy with work and travel." Her lips tightened slightly, and she ventured another question. "Have you been going out at all, or just staying here by yourself?" There it was, the question I had been waiting for. Now was the moment to see how she reacted to the possibility that I had moved on too. "I've been keeping busy," I replied, my tone deliberately nonchalant. "I joined a cycling group. We meet twice a week for long rides, 40 to 60 miles, sometimes more. It's been great, really. I've met a lot of new people, and we usually grab a beer and a burger after. Between all the exercise and the stress you've caused, I've dropped 15 pounds these past few weeks. Honestly, it's probably the only thing that's kept me sane." "That's nice," she said, attempting to sound casual, though I caught the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. I could see the wheels turning as she wondered if I had met someone new. Her discomfort was almost palpable. As she drove away, I had no doubt she was beginning to see that her plan wasn't unfolding the way she'd imagined. She likely expected me to be sitting at home, drowning in self-pity while she enjoyed her newfound freedom. But now she had to wonder, what if I found someone else? What if the attention she was chasing from other men only served to push me away permanently? The reality that her fantasy might backfire seemed to dawn on her in that moment. Later, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Melanie had been dating 2 men she'd met at the club she frequented with Nicole. She had been hoping for something more meaningful, but both men were only interested in casual flings. To them, Melanie was nothing more than a fleeting distraction, a temporary escape. By the 2-month mark, it was clear to me that our marriage was over. Melanie hadn't contacted me in weeks, and it was obvious she wasn't thinking about me or our relationship. She was entirely immersed in her new lifestyle, with no sign of wanting to come home. And even if she did decide to return, it would be on my terms, if I even allowed her back at all. Not that I was inclined to. Around that time, I discovered she had taken a vacation to the Dominican Republic with one of her boyfriends during the school break. They spent their days lounging on beaches, sipping cocktails, and doing other things. So much for her claim that this was about strengthening our marriage. Instead, it seemed like she was living out the fantasy Nicole had sold her, that I had somehow been a neglectful husband, driving her to seek affection elsewhere. Meanwhile, Melanie's reputation was beginning to unravel. Her family had started asking questions, especially after her mother found out about her Caribbean getaway with another man. One evening, her mother called me, thinking there must have been a misunderstanding or some sort of marital spat. "Tyler, what's going on with you and Melanie?" her mother asked, her voice filled with concern. "Did you two have a fight? Why isn't she home with you?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "She left me, Maureen. She decided she wanted to sleep with other men. She thinks this is some sort of phase she needs to go through before we start a family." There was stunned silence on the other end of the line. "That can't be true," she finally said, disbelief thick in her tone. "Melanie wouldn't do that." "Talk to her yourself," I replied calmly. "But that's the truth." And so, her mother did. "Melanie, why on earth would you leave your home? What's happening between you and Tyler? Is something wrong? Is he treating you badly?" her mother asked, clearly worried. "No, Mom, Tyler isn't hurting me. It's not like that, Melanie replied, her voice defensive. But I don't feel wanted by him. I don't feel desirable anymore. I need to feel attractive, to be appreciated. Right now, I don't get that from him, so I'm finding it elsewhere. This is just something I need to do. For me. Her mother's shock was evident. Melanie, don't you see? If you're with other men, Tyler won't take you back. Cheating on your husband will only destroy your marriage. You're throwing everything away. Mom, you don't understand, Melanie insisted. Tyler loves me. He'll wait. I'll come back in a few months, maybe a year, and then we'll have babies. Everything will be fine. Melanie, listen to yourself, her mother pleaded. If you keep this up, there won't be a marriage to come back to. You'll lose him for good. But Melanie wouldn't listen. I know what I'm doing, Mom. Tyler loves me, and he'll understand. Even her mother's warnings couldn't break through her delusion. While Melanie convinced herself that everything would magically work out, I had already made up my mind to move forward with my life. By the 3-month mark, it was clear there was no point in waiting for her to come to her senses. I had spent those months staying busy, work, gym sessions, cycling, and long hours of sleep, but I realized that wasn't enough. It was time to focus on building a new future for myself. Melanie might have thought I'd be here, waiting for her to return, but she was wrong. I wasn't going to sit around mourning what we had lost while she lived out her misguided fantasies. I was done waiting. It was time to reclaim my life. Deciding to ask one of the women from my cycling group out felt like a step forward, a way to break out of the monotony that had consumed my life since Melanie left. It wasn't about finding something serious right away. I just needed some company, something different. A small part of me still hoped Melanie might snap out of her fantasy and come home, but I had to accept reality. She wasn't the same woman I had married. She was too wrapped up in chasing the freedom and validation she thought she'd been missing. When I approached Haley, a woman I'd gotten to know a bit through the cycling group, I kept it casual. I didn't want to come across as desperate or like I was using her to fill a void. Most of the group probably knew I was separated, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of them had heard about Melanie's antics. Gossip tends to circulate, especially in a mid-sized city like ours. So, when I asked Haley if she'd like to grab a drink and something to eat, I was genuinely surprised when she said yes. I planned the date to be laid back, nothing too serious or overthought. We decided on an afternoon of kayaking at the lake near the city, followed by dinner. It had been years since I last kayaked, but I felt confident enough to show Haley the ropes since she'd never done it before. She seemed excited, eager to try something new, which put me at ease. The date exceeded all my expectations. Haley loved kayaking, and we spent nearly 3 hours paddling across the water, covering about 10 miles in total. It felt good to be out in nature, the physical effort grounding me in a way I hadn't experienced in months. Afterward, we headed to a cozy restaurant for dinner. I kept it simple with a steak and fries paired with a local craft beer, while Haley went for pasta and a glass of white wine. The atmosphere was relaxed, the conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my situation lift, even if just for a little while. After dinner, we decided on ice cream from a stand along the waterfront. We wandered the boardwalk as the sun dipped below the horizon, the evening air cool but refreshing. The whole date felt natural and unforced, a stark contrast to the tension that had consumed my life for months. When I drove Haley home, I thanked her for a great day and told her I'd had a wonderful time. I leaned in, intending to give her a polite kiss on the cheek, but to my surprise, she kissed me on the lips instead. It was unexpected but pleasant, and I didn't linger. Not wanting to come across as too eager, I decided to wait until our next group cycling meetup on Tuesday to ask her out again. At the meetup, Haley surprised me by saying she thought I hadn't enjoyed myself because I hadn't called. I quickly reassured her, explaining that the opposite was true. I'd had a fantastic time and really enjoyed spending the day with her. Relieved, we made plans for the upcoming Saturday, this time to play golf. I'd read that when it came to communication, there was a balance. Texting or calling too much could make you seem needy and push people away. So I sent her a text on Friday to confirm our plans and let her know I was looking forward to it. I also gave her the option of meeting me at the golf course or having me pick her up. She chose the latter, and we settled on an early afternoon tea time. It was refreshing to focus on something new, on someone who seemed genuinely interested in spending time with me. For the first time since Melanie had walked out, I felt like I was beginning to reclaim my life and maybe even a piece of happiness. We had a fantastic time on the golf course. Neither of us was particularly skilled, but that didn't matter. It was all about having fun together. The laughter, lighthearted competition, and shared moments made the day unforgettable. That evening, instead of going out, we had to dinner at my place. I grilled steaks, opened a bottle of wine, and kept the mood casual and relaxed. When the evening grew late, I offered to drive Haley home, but she took my car keys, set them down on the counter, and asked if she could see the bedroom. The next morning, I woke up to find Haley beside me, her arm draped across my chest. She looked stunning, even in the soft morning light. Long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, striking green eyes still heavy with sleep, and flawless skin that practically glowed. A small scar on her chin from a bicycle accident only added to her unique beauty. At 5'11", she carried herself with elegance, her toned figure a testament to her active lifestyle. As a pediatric nurse, Haley radiated warmth and compassion, and her magnetic personality was something I had been drawn to from the very start. We had breakfast out on the patio, the morning air cool but refreshing. Over coffee and eggs, our conversation drifted to more serious matters, specifically, Melanie. Haley was direct, asking what my plans were with my estranged wife. It was a fair question. No one wants to invest emotionally in someone who might go running back to their ex at any moment. I laid it all out for Haley. The bizarre way Melanie had left and her ongoing absence. Haley's calm and honest perspective confirmed what I had already suspected. Melanie wasn't coming back, and even if she did, there was nothing left to salvage. That conversation gave me the final push I needed. By Monday, I had contacted my lawyer and asked her investigator to dig deeper into Melanie's activities before proceeding with the divorce papers. The findings weren't surprising, but still disappointing. Melanie had been dating a steady stream of married men, frequenting bars and clubs, before ending her nights partying at Nicole's apartment. It wasn't long before the paperwork was ready, and 2 weeks later, Melanie was officially served with divorce papers. That same evening, she showed up at the house, clutching a large brown envelope, her face pale and distressed. I opened the door and leaned against the frame, trying to keep my composure. "Melanie, what brings you here tonight?" I asked, my tone flat. "Someone delivered these papers to me today," she stammered, holding up the envelope. "Why did you file for divorce? I told you I'd be back soon. I was even thinking about coming home this week, so we could start trying for that baby we talked about." I gestured for her to come inside and sit in the kitchen. "It's too late for that, Melanie. I told you when you left that I didn't want this, but you went anyway." "Honey, I told you I needed to figure out who I am, to feel good about myself," she said, her voice pleading. I laughed bitterly. "And do you feel good about yourself now? Are you validated enough as a woman? Have you explored your sexuality enough? Had enough excitement? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been busy throwing away everything we built together. You didn't even call me on my birthday. And on Mother's Day, you were too busy in the Dominican Republic with some boyfriend to call your own mother." Her face turned red, but she pressed on. "Honey, I love you, and I can see now that I went too far. But I'm ready to come home." "No," I said firmly. "You're not." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm still your wife, Tyler, and this is still my home, too. I'm coming back. I'll grab my things from Nicole's place and be back in a few hours." I crossed my arms, my voice colder now. "No, you're not. Did you even bother to read the papers in that envelope? There's a judge's order in there that says you're not allowed within 500 feet of this house until the divorce is finalized. Technically, you're violating that order just by being here. I won't make a fuss this time, but you need to leave. We'll handle everything else in court." Melanie stared at me, her face frozen in disbelief. She clutched the envelope as if it were a lifeline that had suddenly been yanked away. Finally, she nodded, her shoulders slumping as she turned to leave. I watched her walk to her car, her steps heavy, and as she drove away, I felt a wave of relief. For the first time, it felt like the nightmare was truly ending. Melanie had finally learned the hard way that our wedding vows weren't one-sided. They included faithfulness, honor, and respect, values she had trampled on in pursuit of fleeting thrills. She might have thought she could waltz back into this house and pick up where we left off, but I made it clear that wasn't happening. If she wanted the house, she could buy out my half, or we'd sell it and split the proceeds. Either way, I wasn't staying. A month later, we finalized the divorce without a drawn-out courtroom battle. Melanie got half of everything, as the law entitled her, and the house was sold. I moved on with my life. Melanie, however, faced the fallout of her choices. Word spread at her charter school about her affairs, and parents began complaining, mostly mothers, though ironically, some of the fathers might have been among her lovers. Not long after, I heard she was diagnosed with an STD. It wasn't life-threatening, but it meant no intimacy for about a year. On top of that, she was pregnant. The father? Unclear, though rumors pointed to one of the married teachers at her school. As for me, my life moved forward. I bought a new house, earned a promotion at work, and most importantly, Haley and I are thriving. A year has passed since Melanie left, and now I'm happier than I ever imagined. Haley and I are planning our wedding this summer, and by Christmas, we'll be welcoming our first child. And that's the end of it.